I disappointed father in Spiral Abyss, and this is what I learned.
Everybody stand! With wind and cloud, let's light it up!
Video games are hard. Arlecchino does pretty decent damage, as most fathers should, if they want to keep their kids in line. For a real quick overview, use skill, cycle through supports for buffs and debuffs, charged attack, John
Father.
Madden. Skill applies a mark, mark has to cook, once bold in red, rip mark off with a charged attack and obtain Bond of Life, which I will occasionally affectionately refer to as Ball. More Ball is more damage. If you're above 30% Bond of Life, you gain Pyro Infusion and a damage boost to normal attacks. Attacking drains your balls, but also reduces your skill cooldown. Hitting a target with her skill will give 65% if popped immediately, or 130% if popped after 5 seconds. The max you can obtain per skill cast is 145%. That means if you hit 3 targets, you can rip it immediately to hit that cap. Your Bond of Life can carry over into the next rotation, which further boosts your damage. Continuing to carry your balls means you can eventually hit a maximum cap of 200%, and that's a lot of damage. Simply being in combat boosts your pyro damage, and you get heal cucked by anything that isn't her burst. Father won't hear any of that shit, because healing is for people that make mistakes. Her burst empties your balls, but also refreshes your skill cooldown. Using it is a DPS loss over time, but if you want to do it anyway, I won't tell Father. On to the Abyss. I've tried her in a number of teams with varying levels of success. Starting with my flops, double swirling VV setups are hard. When everything goes well, the damage is very poggers. When something goes wrong, the damage is still sort of poggers, but the self-inflicted psychological damage is permanent. Not using Kazuha's burst simplifies things significantly, but then you're not using Kazuha's burst, which limits your AoE Hydro application, so pick your poisson. That joke was kinda fishy. One thing to be careful of, since you're starting Arlecchino's field time with a charged attack, you have an extra application of Pyro to worry about, which may or may not cost you a vape on your first normal attack. To resolve this, you can move Yelan's E to after your Anemo unit swirls Pyro, so you can start with Hydro applied when Father takes the field. If you're using Thrilling Tail Sucrose, you can throw a few normal attacks to get your Hydro hydrating. Note that the more time you spend on Sucrose, the less time you're spending disciplining naughty children, so you may prefer to ignore the first vape and simply disrespect your surroundings. Fortunately, there is another way around this, utilizing internal cooldown rules. After your Anemo unit swirls, you can swap to Arlecchino and not do a charged attack. Instead, throw 3 normals. The first normal attack will vape, but not really, which starts your hit and timer rules. The second and third hit won't apply Pyro, then your charged attack that doesn't have ICD will vape, followed by your first normal attack of the new combo, which will vape due to hit rule. Then your second normal attack, which will also vape due to the timer rule. This is a lot of Pyro and not a lot of time, so it'll require a lot of Hydro application. If you went for her C2, it's even more difficult, as you now have 4 applications of Pyro in a Pyro. I guess whales have more problems than just plastic and harpoons. I've tried pairing her with Kazuha, Sucrose, and Lynette, and while Sucrose yields the highest damage, Kazuha feels more comfortable to use, and Lynette is there. If you don't have either of the other two, she may have shown up on your doorstep while you're waiting for Dad to come home. She'll contribute with VV shredding, a modest attack buff, and even a decent taunt on her burst. So while you may not see output as impressive as our tried and true Anemo crew, she still has her strengths. If you find this team too fragile, you can simply do more damage. Enemies can't kill you if they're dead. Or swap Yelan for Xingqiu. And while I find it slightly more annoying to set up, it's not too bad if you're mindful of Xingqiu's orbitals and don't accidentally clear an enemy's power aura by entering their personal space. You can also run them together, with Yelan and Xingqiu both contributing significant off-field damage and Hydro application. From there, you can either choose an Anemo unit to shred Hydro resistance, or a defensive option like Thoma, Layla, or Zhongli. If you really want to impress Father, that is, almost die, all the time, you can tag Bennett and Furina in, and Arlecchino will fairly consistently float at around 50% health. Unless Furina is C2, it's not particularly easy to stack her fanfare quickly, but if you do happen to have that luxury, you can get some pretty impressive results. All it costs is Furina's peace of mind and years of trauma. At least she gets cake in return. While we're looking at the not-so-synergistic, I also tried plunging. It was fine. It doesn't use Arlecchino's kit in any meaningful way, so my neurons remain unfired. But if there's anything worth noting about it, you do have somewhat better survivability in that regard, since a lot of your time is spent using your enemy's face as a trampoline. It's Arlecchino. On that note, if fragility is the main concern, we can go back to the traditional Vape team, and you can drop your Anemo unit entirely for someone like Zhongli, Diona, or Layla. Using a Cryo Shielder is nice against enemies you can freeze, as you'll occasionally squeeze an extra melt out here or there, but using it against things that can't be frozen can work against you, as the Cryo application can actually remove the Hydro aura and grief you instead. To avoid this, you can neglect your Cryo unit's burst to minimize unnecessary Cryo applications. In the event you don't want to lose your Anemo unit and release yourself from the confines of Bennett's circle, you can instead throw yourself into Dia's circle and use her as your defensive support unit instead. While this works, Thoma does it better. Shields that refresh as you throw normal attacks provide both resistance to interruption and damage negation, so it's hard for me to cope Dia into the spot. But if you don't want to use Thoma, Dia still manages, while also bringing some mommy to the Father team. She can even hold the Tenacity set for an extra attack buff. While on the topic of Pyro shielders, C4 Yanfei and Xingqiu also work, the former being able to hold Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers, and the latter being another Tenacity holding candidate. Moving over to Melt, I found this to be very okay. Mismanagement of elemental auras can have you melting in the wrong order, and the DPS windows feel more limited, as off-field cryo uptime isn't very impressive, but you can get some pretty cool numbers. I tried Kazuha first, but because of how easy it is to grab Pyro into his burst, you're forced into using it early in your rotation, and its uptime is relatively short. Sucrose's burst absorption is dank as usual, but I've actually found Lynette to be pretty effective in single target here, since her Boggle Cap box lasts longer than Kazuha's burst. Diona at C6 brings an EM buff to the table, and Rosaria provides a crit rate boost, all while tying you down to a whole lot of circles, you kinky freak. If that's not your vibe, Kaya and Layla are both good options. On to easier endeavors. Overload was pleasantly powerful, provided you pulled for Chevros. I tried variations of this team with different combinations of Fischl, Yai, Bennett, and Beidou. You can drop Bennett for another defensive power option like Toma, Dia, C4 Yanfei, or Xingqiu, but there is a noticeable drop in damage. So we end up back to the with great risk comes great reward problem, where you choose Bennett for damage and Beidou for comfort. Running Bennettless feels like walking around with your pants off. There is no greater freedom until you get arrested and put on a list.
Drop your weapons!
Beidou works particularly well in AoE situations, while Fischl single target is respectable on top of being a strong battery. So you have the option to bring one or the other depending on what you want to blow your overload on. I'll generally try to find any opportunity I can to simp for Yai, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't value Fischl's shorter field time more for this team. Other than sending small enemies to meet Mother, there's not much else to say. The damage ceiling isn't as high as Vaporize without C6 Chevros, but it's very straightforward to play, and it still feels pretty strong. Speaking of straightforward and strong, Mono Pyro was surprisingly fun. Mono Pyro is typically my least favorite team to play, but Arlecchino triggers something in me. Not so much in the party, but this does make my brain happy. As per usual, you can run Bennett, Xiangling, and Kazuha or Sucrose, or swap out someone for Zhongli if you'd rather have a little more durability. Xiangling gets plenty of chances to cook everywhere else, so I've opted to replace her, and I found this team to be delightfully dominating. And finally, against my better judgment, I tried Burgeon. Tried. Some things to note regarding combat. While some rotations can be somewhat rigid, her actual field time is pretty flexible. There are optimal combos and cancels you can do, but considering how fragile she is without a defensive unit, you'll find yourself dodging fairly often. Fortunately, canceling her normal attack string to avoid being splattered into a fine and bloody mist doesn't often result in a significant drop in damage, so you can safely move out of harm's way and continue disemboweling your enemies. In addition to this, unlike most other units with self-infusion, Arlecchino can exit the stage and pop back in without losing her personal buffs. This is great for a number of reasons, like reapplying your Viridescent Venera Shred to a new wave of enemies spawning in, regrouping enemies, getting a quick Beidou parry off, or swapping into Rosaria in a desperate and futile attempt to fix your Cryo aura. Another somewhat important point to address, Arlecchino's skill launches her at enemies like an Asian father goes to slobberknock his kid for getting an A- in calculus. The targeting on this has been pretty good in my experience, but the distance closed is quite far, so if enemies are edging your Bennett circle, you may find yourself accidentally pushing them further out of it. This could be anywhere from neutral to bad, but the good news is her third normal attack disrespects personal space and can yank later enemies back into you. One thing that took me a minute to get used to was the visual indicator for Bond of Life on her health bar. It all looks kinda red. Red is scary, so it sort of feels like you're always in a state of danger. After you get used to that, it feels like you're never in a state of danger, even when you are. At some point in time, your sense of self-preservation recalibrates and keeping your very merry health bar in check becomes second nature again, but this might be something you'll want to keep in mind. Back to the bad news. Severe skill issue is severely punished. Arlecchino's skill has a pretty large range, but if you somehow miss the cast, don't have any bond to work with, and don't have your burst up to reset it...
Commendable, everlasting as the moon,
Oh, what? I missed! No, my mark! What do I do now? I just twiddle my thumbs for 20 seconds? You either spend the next 2 rotations with Bennett working battery overtime, or the next 30 seconds reflecting on that pitiful excuse for an attack. On the topic of her skill, the Blood Debt Directive that you claim with a charged attack works perfectly 99% of the time. The 1% is against the Perpetual Mechanical Array, where you can't claim your debt against the PMA when it's shielded and knocked down, and you can't claim your debt against its constructs when they get killed. I imagine this shouldn't happen often, but it was definitely noticeable at the time I was testing. Regarding her burst, if you're looking to clear a chamber in style, that's a good way to go. However, if you're in dire straits, be careful about your burst timing. The heal comes at the end of the burst. If your off-field units are cooking while you're watching the cool cinematic, and they happen to kill off the rest of the chamber before your burst finishes, you lose your heal. And if you haven't ended a chamber on your burst, you probably ended it on a normal attack, in which case, it's gonna look goofy as
Father.
I must go, my people need me. Since Arlecchino's so eager to escape, let's talk about open world. Literally unplayable. Breaking boxes takes forever. Her flight eats stamina like an unattended fat kid in a donut shop. She can't gather wood when she's power infused, teleporting into a different map clears her bond of life, and grass kills her. 4 out of 11 would not recommend. On a serious note, I did find overworld content to be pretty comfortable. Her long skill cooldown is hardly an issue since her infusion isn't bound to a duration and can last for anywhere between 19 to 21 hits on a single cast, with more if you have her signature weapon or you've been hoarding Bond of Life from one group of enemies to the next. You can heal her with food or other character abilities if you're out of combat, and while that does clear her bond, if you're stopping to heal, your skill cooldown will likely be up by the time you head over to your next slaughter anyway. But if for whatever reason it isn't, take your time. Have a leisurely stroll to the next kill zone. You might notice Arlecchino's walking animation is different from the other tall female character models. Even if you don't notice, I just told you. MiHoYo's character representation has been really impressive to me lately. I finally get to pull for a father as violent as my own. You can play it safe with a shielder and dish out respectable damage, or go balls deep and really ruin someone's day. Her high-risk, high-reward playstyle is incredibly satisfying, and while it might not be everyone's cup of tea, it was exactly what I was hoping for. She's the father figure to my dad bod. And for those of you asking funeral parlor or funeral father, why not both? It's not a great team, but it is kinda funny. How do you know a dad joke is a dad joke? When it hits like a mother
Father.
And thank you to my channel members. To you I offer a prayer. Our Father, who haunt the seven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we finish those who trespass against us. And lead us way into temptation, regardless of evil. For thine kingdom is power, however gory, forever and ever. Oh man, I'm so down bad.